I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Anne Westcott, and I'm a partner here at SMARTmoves. I'm talking to you from Newton, Massachusetts at our new site. Many of you may have already seen two of my partners, Alex Cook and Heather Finn, present earlier last week and the week before. If you're here next week, Elizabeth Warner, my fourth partner, will be presenting on vestibular input. But first, I wanted to take a moment to express my gratitude and appreciation to the Trauma Research Foundation for actually inviting us to get to share our work with you. It's a really exciting opportunity, and we're grateful that they invited us. So what I have planned for us today is just like a 10, 15 minute informational visual sharing, and then we'll try some tools. I think you're going to be able to do some of these things in your home, and then you might be able to use some of the information. There goes the commuter rail. Some of the information to make sense of how SMART works. All right. So we're a very unusual child treatment, and we're using a lot of what we understand about child development, and we're going to get into that. Today, we're going to look at the unique component of tactile and touch. Like tactile is what we take in through our skin, and touch as it applies to the SMART model. We think about somatic regulation, the home base of SMART that you can see here in the dark blue, is we want to use and explore how tactile input can help regulate arousal in the nervous system. We're also aware that sometimes touch input can trigger traumatic material to stir up for kids and adults. So we're holding in mind that touch contact from a human being may or may not have stirring material. And then the third thread that we're looking at is how providing the right kind of tactile touch inputs through the caregiver-child relationship or therapist-child may help promote and build attachment capacity in our children. So the developmental hierarchy, which Alex Cook shared with you in week 1 and Heather reviewed, really is our foundational map to make sense of children, the work we're doing, how development happens. And you can kind of see down here, I'm going to go back for a sec. You can see down here this core foundation. And our first 3 talks are really about these inputs, tactile, proprioceptive, and vestibular, in some ways what we call the hidden 3 inputs. Senses compared to like vision, smell, taste. And if there's been kind of a poor wiring up at this brainstem level and at the sensory processing level of information organizing, you're going to get dysregulation all the way up the system. Because as we're starting to learn more from neuroscientists and people who are seeing this model, it's really an integrated flow, bottom up and top down, that's necessary for really achieving your highest functioning capacity, no matter, and that's for children and adults. So SMART is going to take a pretty careful look at how the child's bodies are organizing information in the world and inside, knowing that often developmental trauma and chronic stress, lots of trauma in the environment or disruptions in caregiving in early life may lay down kind of a poor level of wiring here. And if this isn't working, the whole rest of the pyramid's going to struggle. So before we start to look at how we use the tools, a few things for you to remember or think about has to do with the skin receptors. And the skin is our largest organ in the body. And it's taking in information way more than we're ever conscious of. In SMART, we've kind of had to simplify, and we're looking particularly at this light touch system that's up here near the surface of the skin, and this deep touch system in blue that's further down in the skin. And if we think about it, our light touch system is very arousing and alert for a lot of people. It lets you know if there's like a bug on you, you might feel it. I've even heard that your skin on your feet has incredible light touch sensors, so that if you start to step on something sharp, there's almost an automatic pop-up of the foot away from that contact. On the other hand, there's these deep touch pressure receptors that are much deeper in the body. And those, you have to give yourself some pretty big input to get to, and we'll experiment. Besides that, there's baroreceptors that take in like the sense of pressure on the skin, low pressure and high pressure. We have pain sensors. So we're going to look at particularly the light touch, deep touch, and the dynamic touch system. So before we go there, I'd like to share a really beautiful piece of film that, let's see, here we go, kind of communicates both. I think this piece is really important because it's going to show us both human touch for regulation as well as tactile input from the temperature of the water and from the movement of the water and it flowing over her. So in some ways, or him, or in some ways we can begin to see that the baby is feeling both a secure, probably more in the deep touch receptors of stable holding, of safety, of warmth. At the same time, we can sense how the baby is allowing that fluid, almost reminding us of the amniotic fluid, bathing over her body. And as we watch this in the slow, gentle movement of the human hands, one of the interesting pieces I got from research I was reading about or listening to on a podcast, just is that the touch of a human stroke against your body has the ability to trigger a release of oxytocin, or that love drug, in humans, but also in primates. And they were looking at some research and noticing that if the hand, the stroke, is about 4 millimeters a second, that pace, the pace we're seeing in this film, actually is the right time window for that release of oxytocin. And they're noticing it's the same pace in primates when they're grooming each other, and they saw the same release there in studying primates, faster or slower, and we didn't see that indigenous love hormone that we can create. So touch is this first language for human beings. I think this really captures it. All right, shrink that back down. So now I'd like to take a minute to show you some of our materials here in the room that we use. I think, yeah, I can see my camera. So these are some images that we've taken that we've used. I'm going to show you some too, particularly here. We've actually, a lot of kids love to lie on the crash cushion, you can see over there, and frequently they like to have a physio ball put on top of them. And as you'll notice in the bottom corner, they actually, one of the things in SMART we do a lot of is like asking the child how much pressure they would like. And we've learned from watching film over and over again, years and years of different people, that they really tend to crave more input than we would have expected. They really like that deep touch pressure. We've also learned that we want to ask every child, every adult, and we want to experiment until they get this kind of answer in the body, this aha moment of, oh, that was just right. That's just the right amount of pressure. And we actually have a term, we term that satiation. Another thing you're noticing, and I actually use these with all of my clients, adults and children and myself. We use weighted blankets, and I could probably put it on. Oh yeah, and I bet my presentation will get a little bit better, because with this weightedness, I get a little autonomic nervous system drop, and my voice may shift a little bit. I kind of get a sense of like, oh, things are okay. So when we're looking at physiology and working with arousal, these are some of the tools that we use. Another one for dynamic touch that children really love is this. I'm going to just pause here for a sec. This is what is called a sensory shaker. And you can tell it's like full of these little balls. It's full of them. If you've ever seen a ball pit at the play space, and we have kids who will just open this bag up and go dive in and roll around, and then they might be asked to be picked up and swung, and they're like wiggling around there, getting the balls to roll all over their bodies. So that's been a really fun tool. And there's one more tool I wanted to show you, and that is the aerial hammock, if you haven't seen it. I actually use this in my office. Here we go. I think I shared that. Let's see. Green button. So this is my was my hybrid smart room before we moved here to Newton. Swaddling deep touch pressure. So the hammock itself is stretchy. So when we have somebody inside, they're being wrapped and getting deep touch pressure pretty much all along the skin contact with the hammock. So when you're in this hammock, it's like it surrounds you and wraps you, and you feel very secure, and yet you also feel able to move and very light. So I've used this hammock with adults and children. I've used it with a few of my adults who have early childhood trauma. And curiously, they both, a couple of them really responded with this like sense of, oh, wow, this feels safe to me. One client, I would pull up this white chair and actually sit up towards her head. And as she was lying in the hammock, she wanted the weighted blanket. And we did our session where she could look through the screen of the hammock and see me and feel me, but also feel like this boundary and this cocoon and this protectedness. And she described feeling like this sense of safety that she really hadn't. She said it's like being in the womb. It's like being, but I'm with you. So there was this attachment security I felt like was being established at like a foundational level. That was particularly powerful. And later in our treatment, she would use the hammock also, and we would see this cycle where as she first landed, there would be a lot of autonomic nervous system shaking, like you might see in Peter Levine's work, Pat Ogden's work, and that just like muscle discharge arousal. And as that would slide through and she would calm, then you would get this peak of primary affect. There wasn't a lot of words to it. There would be just kind of a big emotive. And then as her nervous system got more regulated, moving up the developmental hierarchy, we would start to see and feel like her thinking come online and her meaning making and her story. And it was in a much more integrated place. So the hammock work for her really began to widen her window of tolerance and allow her to get comfortable with that autonomic sequencing of arousal and comfortable with strong affect without feeling like she's kind of coming apart at the seams. The hammock really held her incredibly well. So at this point, what I wanted to do was pop back for a sec and remind you about our regulation map, because I have a little thing I want to try with you. I'm hoping you're at home, and I'm going to move my camera. I think you can see the regulation map probably pretty easily. And I actually want you to be able to see my feet, because, and you're also going to see what the SMART floor is made of. Let's see if I get about here. I think you can see them. So I would like you to find something in your environment that has some different tactile stuff to it. And if you think about this regulation map up on your screen and think about, as we try different equipment, I'm wanting you to begin to think about, do I feel that kind of in my integrated state, I'm organized, I can think, I can feel, I can do? Is it moving me up the arousal scale when my feet get this input, or is it moving down the arousal scale? So I'm going to stop sharing. Hold that map, or why don't you take a screenshot if you can of the map so you can bop back to it if you need to. I mean, it's really a variation of the window of tolerance. So here's my inputs. And yes, I'll go to this physio ball. Let's see. So I'm going to try just the bumpy side of the green one. And if you could find something that you would like to experiment with, and I'm just going to wiggle my feet on it.
And could you speak up just a little bit? It's a little hard to hear you.
All right. Yeah. So I'm going to just wiggle my feet on it and get some input. And this is kind of pokey. So it's definitely waking me up. But this one is kind of smooth. It's got bigger bumps. You can tell the difference. And part of SMART is really about having the people, kids, adults, whomever, explore the inputs and find out through their physiology, which one do I like best? So this is a little wobbly, but it's much more comfortable than the other one. But then we have like this beautiful roller where I can put this down, and maybe, I already can tell I'm going to really like this one. Maybe I'm just going to roll my feet back and forth and see which one regulates me the most. Yeah. I was at the beach the other day too, and if you could just imagine putting your feet in the sand, in the warm sand, or just letting that sand kind of drizzle onto your toes, and just even remembering that might help you feel like your body is shifting in the arousal zone. Yeah. So you could put in the chat any things you noticed. You might describe what the object is and whether it was calming or arousing. So that's like a little drip into SMART and how we use our tools for both somatic regulation and also for attachment building. particularly giving the child the experience to discover what they like best. And then the parent being able, or the caregiver being able to really respect and support their inner wisdom about what helps them. So I hope maybe I see some of you at our trainings. You can look at our website. We run them kind of regularly. But thank you for coming, and thank you for being interested in our work. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Okay, we have a few minutes here for questions. If everybody has questions, just drop them in the chat, and I will read as many of them as I can. One of the first ones was, can people have access to the map, the window of tolerance and regulation map?
Yeah, actually, it's in our book. So as long as you cite it, I'll look into how I can, maybe we can post it, or you can go on our website and we can have it posted there.
If you send them to me, Anne, I can have them go out in the next,
okay,
in an email to all the members.
Yep, that sounds good. Be happy to.
Someone's asking, where are you located geographically, and what is the website?
Geographically, we're in Newton, Massachusetts. We actually have been doing trainings remotely, and we're training all over the globe. With the pandemic, we stopped doing our in-person trainings at the moment, but we use a lot of video. And so there's a lot of shared and experiential stuff in the trainings. Yeah. We're trying to train therapists all over the country so that kids and people have access.
How many OTs are involved with training?
Say that again.
How many OTs are involved with the training session?
You know what? Interestingly enough, SMART is really a trauma psychotherapy treatment, and we are very aware that we're not even, trying to treat the sensory system. We'll often, like I'm going to have a meeting tomorrow with a child's OT person and their school staff. And so we often really support working in collaboration. We're thinking much more from the trauma lens. And there's frequently a piece of assessment like, ooh, maybe this really is domain of sensory integration specialist, and we'll often send them for a referral or get a consult to try to flush it out. What we experienced when we first started, we collaborated with Jane Kumar, and we're doing little collaboration projects and some research and where there are OTs involved. So they're not part of this piece of the training. They're not part of our training process. We're really taking a trauma perspective.
Okay. People were asking for, like, how do they find people that are in the network? I don't know if you have a blanket answer for that. People are asking for specific locations, but is there some way they can find?
There will be. We're trying to get our Find a Therapist site, part of our website, up and running. I would say it could be by early December. We probably trained around 500 people around the country. We definitely have people in Minnesota we've trained, Boston area, Nashville. Like, we're kind of spotty. We have like chunks of people, and we do a lot of training for agencies. So we're doing a big training out in Chicago for the CAC, the Child Advocacy Center. So what we're going to do is try to pull all that information into Find a Therapist, part of our website, so you could go in and look and see if anybody in your neighborhood or area is trained. Yeah, hope that's helpful.
Good answer. I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's a wait and see, but it is helpful.
Yeah, it's high on our list.
When will you cover vestibular regulation? What is that, next week?
That's next week with Dr. Warner, and I think it'll be really interesting.
Great. I think that's all the questions I see. Why don't you just give them a little preview as to what to expect next week too?
I expect that it'll be a little bit similar to this, that you're going to get a little bit of the overview and kind of this neuroscience piece, and then Liz is going to give you some examples and both equipment, but probably some video examples of the hammock. I think you're going to see the hammock again, but more from the vestibular perspective. And oftentimes we see a combination of inputs that become really useful for certain people. Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching Liz's.
All right, well, thank you so much, Anne. Oh, hold on, there's one last question here. A few clients told me that weighted blankets triggered anxiety when sleeping with it. Do you have any explanation for this? My wife got me one, actually, and I did not care for it at all. I personally did not like it.
So what we know is every nervous system and every sensory system is its own unique snowflake. And just because I love weighted blankets doesn't mean someone else is. And if people don't, they really describe feeling like trapped, claustrophobic. And it's just, that is not going to help them regulate. So with weighted blankets in particular, there's a lot of testing or experimenting to see, one, if you like it, two, what the weight is that you really like. We've had some kids who are like, I don't like that. Why would I like that? Who would like that? It doesn't even occur to them. So, and some of it maybe at night, it's just too long. Maybe it starts to feel too much. Anything else?
Well, that looks like, oh, someone's asking for a hammock recommendation, aerial hammock recommendation.
I'm going to kind of stand back on that because I had to do a lot of work with some people to feel like I had it installed securely. You should check the aerial hammock sites on your website. I mean, I really needed to have an engineer make sure it was appropriately installed. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Anne. Thank you, everybody, for showing up, and we'll see you all next week. Have a great day.
Great. All righty.